Alex. Thank you for joining me today. I truly appreciate your time and willingness to share your insights in the whiskey industry.
Hi, Sati. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Alex. So, before we get started, let me introduce Alex to our audience. Alex is the founder and CEO of Whiskey Cask Club with extensive experience in the whiskey industry. All right, Alex, let's dive right into our conversation. So, can you provide an overview of your background and experience in the whiskey industry? Why
Yeah,
only Scotch whiskey?
certainly. So I'm from the UK, and I'm a quarter Scottish, and I've lived in Singapore for 17 years. The reason that I set this whiskey cask business up is mainly because of the fact that I've got a lot of connections in the whiskey industry in the UK, obviously in Scotland. I like whiskey myself, and as someone who's been a fan of it for a very long time, the opportunity came along to be able to help people make money by purchasing and trading whiskey casks. The whiskey industry itself is old as alcohol itself. They've been making whiskey in the current format for hundreds of years, and the market's recently opened up to international investors within the last 20 years. So being here in Southeast Asia, I've been able to open it up to the wider market in this region.
Got it, nice. All right, so what initially sparked your interest in whiskey cask investment?
Well, it's mainly the returns, Sati. When you've got the ability to buy a physical asset, as in a 200-liter barrel of whiskey that sits in a warehouse in Scotland and matures, it increases in value at the same time. Everyone knows that when you go into a shop, that a special edition bottle of whiskey could cost anything from between 20 to 30 pounds. But if you start buying 10, 12, 18, 25-year-old whiskies, they go up in value considerably. This is one of the reasons that I really wanted to bring people the ability to invest in these casks. You buy a cask of whiskey, and the logic dictates that the older the whiskey is, the more valuable it becomes. So this is an alternative asset that people are now able to invest in, and we facilitate that for investors all over the world.
Got it. And how do you evaluate potential investments in the whiskey market?
Well, we have extensive experience in the kinds of whiskey that we sell to our clients. Largely, we sell whiskey that is going to yield between 16 and 20% per annum. We also have whiskies that we think that are good long-term investments that are used in blends. For example, today we sold quite a lot of Ben Renners, which is a component of Johnnie Walker Black Label. So those whiskies that we want to keep, we think clients should keep from between 5 to 10 years in order to increase in value, and then they will be sold back to the distillery, or sold for blending, or sold for independent bottling. And at that point, the client realizes the upside.
And Alex, can you possible to describe your investment strategy when it comes to selecting whiskey for the fund?
So for the fund is different, because the fund is through the fund we do whiskey trading. So one of the most important things is to be able to find the most suitable whiskies that we're going to be able to buy and sell rapidly. What does that entail? It entails finding whiskey that is we can buy at a very reasonable price, and that we can market up and sell it within a very short period of time. So it's typically tankers of new make, which we then barrel up and sell individually.
Okay, understood. And how do you stay updated on industry trends and developments that could, impact your investment portfolio?
Well, we have daily phone calls with our suppliers and our warehouses. So there's a lot of data that we have accumulated, and ever increasing data that we look after and make sure that what we're buying is the best prices and what we're selling for is the best prices. The strategy is very straightforward. We go to England, we go to Scotland rather every 2 months in order to speak to people on the ground and to make sure that our strategy is aligned with what we believe is the most successful way to do the whiskey trading itself, the fund.
Got it, got it. Can you provide an example of a successful whiskey investment you made and explain the factors that contributed to its success?
Yes, Satya, I can. It was actually pretty straightforward, and it was something that I think that most of our viewers will know about. We had a cask of Macallan, a 1993 Macallan, which we purchased in March for £462,000, and we were able to sell that at the beginning of April, so only 3 weeks later, for £512,000. So this is one of the kinds of deals that we do because we had the buyer and the seller lined up perfectly for this one. And what we did with this cask was we took it and we regauged it. So what does regauging mean? Regauging means taking it from one barrel and putting it into a new barrel or a different reconditioned barrel. Regauging also helps change the finish of the whiskey. But in terms of this Macallan, we were very careful because it was a very expensive cask of whiskey. So we needed to make sure that everything was completely 100% perfect. But we made a substantial profit on that within a few weeks only.
Very nice. Got it, got it, got it. And Alex, what are some key indicators or let's say metrics you use to monitor the performance of your whiskey investments?
Well, we have our own proprietary data. So we're able to get prices in from our suppliers and we know what we're selling at. So we understand where the pricing should be, and that's kind of really important. We get something like 4,000 or 5,000 casks across our desk every week. So we're on top of all the data. We see who's trying to charge too much, who's trying to charge the right prices. We also know who's looking for certain things and what they're willing to pay for it. So the reality is there's a lot of data involved in this, and we have our own set of databases that enable us to really price the cask properly. Whiskey is an OTC market. It's very difficult to get independent pricing on it because the market is very small and quite insular in itself. But at the same time, we have our own proprietary data, so we're able to stay on top of the trends and what the actual current day pricing is at any time.
Got it, got it. And how do you balance your like short-term gains versus long-term growth in your investment strategy?
So there are two ways to look at this. If we trade whiskey, we know that we can do certain amounts of trades on it. Long-term strategies are much more buy and hold. So we do that with certain casks. We typically, with the funds, we look at a 60-40 balance, particularly when we're trying to boost the dry powder, so to speak, of money that we have to buy and trade whiskey with. Because obviously there's more money to be made in their trading, but it's stressful, put it that way, because we have to then find buyers and sellers. Whereas when we buy and hold, we buy it, we hold it, and then as sellers come along, we just sell it. But with the trading aspect of it, we're constantly looking out for buy and sell at the same time.
Got it. Understood. Understood. And Alex, what are some of the current challenges or opportunities you see in the whiskey industry?
Well, currently, challenge that we can see at the moment is the lack of sherry casks. There's a lot of Sauterne and tequila and port casks being used. So it's changing from sherry casks because the reality is people don't really drink that much sherry anymore. Therefore, there aren't enough sherry casks to be finishing whiskey in, so they're becoming quite expensive. So that strategy is changing more to Sauternes and to other Bordeaux casks and tequila casks too. So that profile is changing. Also, people's taste profiles are changing and they're becoming more sophisticated. Independent bottlers want different things. There are thousands of own name brands of whiskey out there that do very well in distribution. So our main effort is to stay on top of that and see what people are actually going to be wanting to buy in 5 to 10 years' time. That's a little bit more tricky than it sounds.
Yeah. And how do you assess the potential impact of external factors such as regulatory changes or the global economic trends on your
Well,
investments?
we're quite looking forward to a trade agreement between the UK and India, because that'll drop the overall prices of Scotch being imported into India. So that will boost the market. I mean, there's already a supply demand disparity, but ultimately now is a good time to buy because we believe that these trade barriers are going to get dropped and therefore demand's going to increase significantly in India. So that will push up the cost of the actual individual whiskey casks. There's an issue with high energy prices at the moment, inflation, but again, for the whiskey cask investor, this is a good thing because it pushes the whiskey casks ride the inflation wave. So again, it's pushing up the prices, and these prices, once they go up, they don't come down again. Although at the same time, whiskey is an FMCG, so it does work in cycles. So I think, in probably 5 to 10 years, it'll regulate and stabilize. Nonetheless, demand is increasing by 6% per annum, and it's expected to do so into the late 2030s. So we've got it's a golden age really to buy and invest in whiskey casks, simply because of the fact that the prices are going up and they will continue to do so into the
Yeah.
mid to long term.
I want to know, how do you build up your relationship with the distilleries and industry professionals?
Drinking lots of whiskey. What it
Got it.
comes
Good
down to,
one.
it's all personal relationships. All of this stuff is
All
personal
personal.
relationships. So,
I
being
see.
on the ground, talking to people, going out with them, playing golf. I'm a terrible golfer. But
Yeah.
all of these things enable you to build these personal relationships, which is where the business gets done.
Correct. Correct. Got it. Got it. And what are your thoughts on the growing interest in whiskey as an alternative investment class?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you've got classic cars, watches, artwork, and all of these things, but consistently over the last 10 years, whiskey's outperformed each one of them. You've got, and again, it's a fast moving consumer good and FMCG. So you've got this constant pipeline of new whiskey being produced and increasing in value and being sold and consumed and starting all over again. Classic cars, there's only a finite amount of them. Watches, similar. How many watches can you own? I mean, I know people who've got lots of them, but the fact is that you buy them and they're there. They don't turn over. Art, similarly, it looks great on a wall. It goes up in value, but it's within the eye of the beholder. So art prices are very subjective, whereas whiskey prices are subjective in the term that distillers, blenders, bottlers, independent investors, there's a market set for it, and therefore they'll buy it. It'll get bottled and consumed. So as an alternative investment, it's reliable. It's based on an asset. It's not like crypto, which is up and down all over the place. We do take crypto, of
Yeah.
course, on an instant conversion basis. But so
Yeah.
the idea is that you've actually got a physical asset that you can use to and you can bottle if everything goes to hell. You can take that cask of whiskey, which belongs to the customer, and you can put it in bottles and drink it.
Got it. Got it. And how do you communicate and manage expectations with your investors regarding the performance and risks of the fund, of the whiskey fund?
Well, the performance is relatively stable. We're looking at a targeted 18% per annum. The reality is that we come up with monthly communiques to the investors to make sure that they're apprised of anything interesting going on in the market. The whiskey market itself is covered widely in the news, so we don't really need to back it up with too much of our own news sources because it's in the newspapers and online. So managing the expectations, pretty much proof is in the pudding that the returns of what people are going to be getting are going to be consistent. the worst case again is, you're looking at something that may flatline at 12% per annum, which is still incredibly good in terms of a return on investment.
Got it. So, Alex, looking ahead, what trends or developments do you anticipate in the whiskey market, and how do you plan to adapt your investment strategy accordingly?
We'll focus on more of what's in demand in emerging economies like China and India, simply because of the fact that that's where the demand's going to be the highest. You've got India overtaking France into the second position by volume already, and that's with the trade barriers still up. So we're going to be looking at what Indian people want to drink more, and probably investing more in that, because that'll be in higher demand than everything else. So the future looks very rosy. But even if these trade barriers remain in place, an increase of 6% per annum in global consumption is very strong. The reality is the whiskey tastes don't generally change that much, so there's no real surprises to be had, which makes life a lot easier, because we're not expecting colossal change around the corner.
All right, so perfect. So thank you so much, Alex, for your time and insights. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you would like to add or share with our audience?
No, I mean, realistically, Sati, as you know, it's a fascinating subject, and we can talk about whiskey for hours and hours, as you and I do. And it's, if people have got any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm sure that the information will be attached to this. And we've got tastings going on in Singapore, and we will be doing so in India too. So in the near future, please come to those tastings and talk to us in person.
Done. Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sati.